Hi, guys. I'm Aditya, and this is episode 3 of What the Growth podcast. Today, we have Philip Eller, who is the co founder and CEO of AccessOwl, which was part of Y Combinator's Summer 22 batch. They raised a seed round last year. And Philip, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Philip, what does AccessOwl do?
Well, in short, AccessOwl automates how your employees receive access to any kind of SaaS tool. So just imagine you have a few employees, they need access to, like a dozen or two software databases, AWS, all these things. And with AccessOwl, you can actually automate giving them access to all of these resources. And what's on top of that is that we do that in a way where we auto-create a full compliance-ready report. So actually, it makes it much, much easier for you to stay SOC 2 compliant, ISO 27 compliant, basically your access management that is just, on top of Google Workspace and just works like a charm.
Got it. I think I checked out your company a little while ago and I realized that you guys are doing most of the access provisioning through Slack, which is so cool. That is correct, right?
That's
Slack.
correct.
And that's very cool. So for context, guys, like you can interface with the AccessOwl tool through Slack. So you can just, is it that you can chat with the bot? Like, how does that work? Like, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so all typical tools use the web interface. And when we started AccessOwl, we were saying, you know what, like we all spend all of our day basically in Slack. And that's where all the users, all of our, customers are.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way for them to interact with us as a tool, and we want to be as seamless as possible compared to like a Jira ticket, is just going into Slack, opening up the AccessOwl app within Slack app, and then there's one big button that says Request Access. There's one button they click, and then basically it's a little modal where they can, like whatever they need access to, the right permission, that is then being forwarded to their manager to actually get the approval in.
Right.
And then last but not least, is either forwarded to AccessOwl to auto provision, or alternatively can also go to a system owner for them to manually provision. So that's usually how it goes, all Slack based, at least the workflows.
So even the manager approvals are Slack based. That's so cool. I remember I briefly worked in a big bank and they had a provisioning portal that looked like it was out of the previous century. So I think what you guys are doing is so cool. So Philip, how big is the AccessOwl team? Like, how many guys are you and where are you based?
We're just 4 people, 2 co-founders and 2 engineers, and fully remote company. However, we started the company in Berlin, so the team is still based in Berlin, or at least close by. And now after YC, I moved to Mountain View, to the Bay Area.
That's awesome. Nice. And who's responsible for looking after growth and marketing within the team, Philip? Is it yourself?
That would be me.
The classic YC one-man army. So actually, on that subject, let's talk a little bit about your YC batch. Like, how has that experience specifically shifted your mindset about growth?
Ooh, that's a good question. YC overall was an incredible experience. And I think what they're really good at is drilling, like really pushing you to always have goals, always be really ambitious in how you set your goals, then just always work on these goals. Like there's nothing else that is important but MRR.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing they drill into you. And I think that's fantastic. And that, but then also the peer pressure within YC, within your cohort, within your little group of peers that you have these weekly meetings with, that is really powerful, and also I think influenced us as a company and how we look at our goals and growth in itself.
Got it. No, that very strongly aligns with my YC experience as well, especially about the ambitious goals part. I found the part to really push you, in the best sense of the word. So Philip, a lot of the founders that tune in are typically like first-time founders who are still on the fence about, what's the right time to apply to YC. Some feel they're too early, some feel it's already too late. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I had a lot of discussions about this with, friends of mine, either people that are thinking about applying to YC or folks that have gone through YC. In my opinion, that's just my opinion, it's great to apply to YC, whenever. It doesn't matter, to be honest. Yeah. It will change how, the experience of YC will depend on the stage that you're in, but you will get a lot out of it no matter what. So for earlier stage companies, this can be amazing to just find the right kind of product that you want to work on, because the partners will still challenge the same way and still kind of push you on having a very high pace on actually getting there very quickly. So there's an acceleration happening with that part. But also, if you already have a product, if you already launched, that acceleration still happens, just on a different level, where it's
Yeah.
more about how can you increase your revenue as quick as possible. And later stage as well. I mean, just having the YC badge, as a company,
Yeah.
it helps with any kind of investor discussions, but also then to maybe sell into YC companies if you're ready for that. So I think across the board, always a good decision, or always a good idea to apply to YC.
For sure. I think that's also my broad advice is like, don't think too much, just apply. And if you get in, then you can, sort of consider and think like whether I should take it or not. But it's only a real choice if you have both the options on the table. So Philip, I am so curious to know about the beginnings of AccessOwl and how did you land your first customer?
Yeah. So the beginning of AccessOwl, funny enough, actually started with me meeting my co-founder in YC co-founder matching.
Oh wow.
So,
That's so funny.
so yeah, Matthias, my co-founder and CTO, he actually worked on, let's say, the predecessor or like the early versions of AccessOwl before we met, and he exactly had this pain point of access management. And when we started talking, I shared with him what I worked on before and the pains that I had, and we just realized that, oh man, like onboarding, user onboarding, access management, access provisioning, these are exactly the pain points we both experienced in the past. So
Yeah.
this was basically the trigger for us to say, hey, let's work on this together. And very soon after, we did our product hunt launch, because we had a very, very early MVP at that stage. And it worked pretty well, to be honest. We ranked, I think, top 5 of the day,
Nice.
and got
This was your
our
first time,
was our
your first launch?
first launch. Yeah.
Nice. Oh,
And we actually landed one customer there. So yeah, that's basically the earliest customer. And besides of that, we got our first customers through a network.
got it. And Philip, one thing I'm always very curious to know is from the day that you started working on the idea, where you and your co-founder were like, okay, this is what we're doing. How long did it take you till the day you closed your first customer?
Oh, so what I can already tell you is we happened to meet up, and then a week later the product hunt launch was there. So that was very quick.
That is so
And
fast.
then until the first customer closed, I think there was probably 6 weeks, maybe.
Got it. But still so quick, like all within a span of like say 2 months.
Yeah.
Got it. No, I love that. Love the velocity. So Philip, if you could go back to when you started and you could only give yourself one piece of advice regarding getting customers, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't think that we did anything completely wrong, but I guess what would have been really valuable from the get-go is to maybe create more content along the way. So this is something that I realize now. You hear so many questions from customers and prospects, and this is just great content to build on. And I wish I would have been more mindful about this from the get-go and just maybe started it earlier. I think that would have helped us to understand the customers better, but also just to, for prospects to can understand our product better as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Taking the voice of the customer and then creating content based off of that is always a great strategy. Also notice you're quite active on LinkedIn, Philip. Is that a growth channel for you now at this stage?
It is. Something that we learned, especially last year when the economy took a little dip, is just that our ICPs, they're just swamped with emails. Like just doing cold outreach is really difficult. It has gotten worse over time for us, and message hasn't changed, but I believe that the people are just less receptive to outreach. So instead, we started doing more launches or more regular launches again. YC is also drilling that, into you and pushing that. But also content in itself, as far as a great channel, and for content distribution, we definitely also use LinkedIn a lot.
Got it. Yeah, for any founder who's a like B2B SaaS founder, you should definitely follow Philip. Like their tool is useful to you, and secondly, Philip occasionally posts the spicy take on things, and it's great content. So you should check out his LinkedIn. So, Philip, let me ask you a question. What's the most ridiculous growth hacking tactic that you've tried till date? And what was the outcome?
So I believe one of the craziest things that we did to test out a new growth channel was actually building an open source product.
Okay.
So the one thing that, we had hypothesis about our ICP really liking to support a common cause in their free time and kind of co-work on a common goal. So we decided to take a central part of our product, the provisioning and actually the user synchronization part of it. So that means that we take our data from different SaaS tools to understand who has access to what. And we took this and we said, hey, why don't we just package it up in an open source product, throw it out there and see what happens? Because in the end, what the best outcome would have been is that our ICP would have started using it and then, started to book demos. So on the one hand, I would say it worked, and another it didn't. So on the one hand, it worked because we did get a few demo bookings in, but on the other hand, we didn't get our ICP to actually, add, their own thoughts, their own input to the open source
Interesting.
project. So it was a good learning. It did work to some extent, but didn't have the impact that we hoped for.
Got it. So your ICP was using the product, but not necessarily contributing as much to the direction of the product as you'd have liked. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that was us. Yeah.
Got it. That's very interesting. Okay. So Philip, let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about, some growth resources, books and podcasts, etc. So what's been your one favorite digital tool when it comes to, doing growth?
So it might sound a bit cheesy saying that these days, but I have to say I really, really like using ChatGPT. Not for it to create blog posts or anything like that. No, not at all. Just basically as a brainstorming tool, to get some ideas on, maybe what could a great headline look like?
Yeah.
What could be great content that is based on my blog post that I recently published? Or just to get some ideas that I just personally would have never thought of. It's a great little helper. And, I'm not a native speaker, so definitely ChatGPT also helps me to just edit my text a little bit. It's a very versatile tool nowadays. So love that.
For sure. I think it helps me so much with the blank canvas sort of thing. If I'm starting from scratch, I use GPT to give it a little bit of structure, seed my thoughts a little bit. It's trained on literally every piece of text that's out there. So it's definitely wiser in some aspect than most people. Cool. And Philip, what about your favorite book or podcast, apart from this one, that you like the most or that's influenced your thinking about how to run a startup?
Yeah. There's many that have influenced me, but I think the one book that I would recommend to anybody, especially in a growth or commercial function, is the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Carnegie's book.
It's an old book. You can tell by some of the examples that it's a little dated, but it still has so many truths inside of it. And it sounds cheesy, the title is definitely a bit off-putting, but I love it. It's a very valuable book.
I love that. What's your biggest takeaway from that book?
That's a good question. I think it's the overall approach. It's mentions many things that feel like common wisdom, but you don't really think about it. And he makes a good point about, selling is about the human. Right? It's to be human and to be very approachable. And that's what I just really appreciate. It's, it's not rocket science, and he makes it pretty clear in his book.
Got it. No, I love that. And, on the subject of humans, Philip, I think humans can at times be quite strange. So let me ask you this, what's the strangest customer feedback or complaint that you've ever received about AccessOwl? And then what did you do with it?
Strangest customer complaint or feedback? It's a difficult question. I have to say that we do get lots of customer feedback and we will not implement everything they say.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I wouldn't call any of that strange. After all, they're customers because they're trying to solve a problem, and whatever they say, whatever pain they have, whatever feedback they have, usually it's still related to the core pain they have,
Yeah.
which is automatically making it valuable feedback to us, even though maybe it's just not the right time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge for any customer feedback, just understanding whether it's the right time to address it or not. And yeah, that's difficult. That's definitely a pain and a challenge for us to sometimes just go back to the customer and tell them, we'll love what you say, but we will not work on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Very, very balanced answer, Philip. Okay, so then let's move on to the last question that I want to ask you today. Was there ever a moment when you questioned your career choice in startups? And then what made you stick with it?
I don't want to say every day, but I mean, I definitely have these days. And, starting a startup is hard. It's hard on you. Even before you start the startup, I think that's where the pain starts. Aditya, before the episode started, we had a little chat about how we both attended like a program to find a co-founder way before YC. And, just finding the right co-founder, finding the right kind of product you want to work on, that's stress on you every day because you feel like you're standing still while everybody around you is running. And the same happens when you then start a company because it feels like everybody else is selling and is looking so great from the outside. So you're sitting in your little room, and you're thinking, okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I fast enough? Am I the right person for this? So I think everybody has these conversations with themselves every day. And, there is not much that you can do about it. You will have these hard times. And the only thing that you should remind yourself of is everybody who has been super successful out there, every single body has these doubts, everybody. And the one thing that is, keeping you in the grind is just reminding yourself that they all don't have superpower. They're not that much smarter than you. The only thing that they did very well is they kept at it, they kept working at it. They kept grinding, they kept doing it. So that's the one thing that I can really recommend doing. These doubts will come every day.
Yeah. No, thank you, Philip. That's very authentic. In fact, that got too real. I went to the void for a second there. And by the way, I can totally relate because even during my YC batch, I felt like pretty much everybody I spoke to was like so much smarter than me and so driven and getting such amazing results. So I think, it's definitely about managing the demons inside your head as much as it is about managing things on the outside.
Yeah.
Cool. Philip, thanks a lot for your time. This was a really fun episode. And, for people tuning in, do check out AccessOwl. If you're in the B2B space, it's probably a good fit. And do follow Philip on LinkedIn as well.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. And looking forward to the next time.
Awesome.
Cheers.